everyone. Thanks for joining us today to learn more about Newcore Gold. For those of you who have not already met me, my name is Mal Kadvovska, and I'm the Vice President of Corporate Development and Investor Relations. I joined about 3 months ago, and just high level, my background is in investment banking, private equity, and on the corporate side. Before we get started, I just want to highlight that we will be making some forward-looking statements today. So I do encourage all of you to visit our website so that you can read through the full disclosure and cautionary language there. As well, we highly encourage questions. Know that there are 2 functions on the right of your screen, both chat and Q&A. So please do use the Q&A function and submit those questions. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Luke Alexander, Newcore's President and CEO, who's going to walk through our investor presentation, after which we'll jump over to those questions. So go ahead, Luke.
Thanks a lot, Mal, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I'll just get started here on slide 3. I think is probably the best place. This really highlights in 8 bullet points, I think, kind of the key differentiators for Newcore and some of the things that get us most excited about the company. I mean, first of all, I think one of the things that you find with Newcore, and it's pretty rare for a company of our size, is to have such a strong board and management team backing the company, and we'll get into that in a couple of slides. We're also very well supported from an institutional perspective. We've got about 25 institutions who currently hold the stock, representing about 35% ownership in the business. Another thing I would highlight is that ultimately management and insiders are very well aligned with shareholders through our 32% interest in the business. And what I always like to highlight here is, I mean, this isn't a company where we gave ourselves a bunch of stock at a penny a share and then expected other investors to come in at 70, 80, 90 cents. We ultimately have put hard dollars into the company. A number of our founders have done so alongside other investors for years. And when I joined, I wrote a big check into the company as well. Ghana is a great jurisdiction to be operating in. We view it as a tier 1 gold jurisdiction. It is Africa's largest gold producer, and along with that comes a huge amount of benefits for us and our shareholders. We've got a really good resource to be building off of, 1.2 million ounces, currently primarily in the oxide category. We've got a 58,000 meter program underway. We're about 10,000 meters into that. We've put out three drill press releases so far, and we'll be very active over the next 6 weeks, releasing those results in batches. Really good tight capital structure, 99 million shares outstanding. And one of the things I always like to highlight is no warrants. I think that speaks to the quality of the asset and the team, that we never had to issue warrants to ultimately attract capital. And we view gold as a great place to be investing at the moment, and think that Newcore is a great way to get exposure to the gold market. In terms of the team and our board of directors, our board, a number of these individuals are individuals who I've worked with for a number of years. Doug Forrester, he's our chairman. He was the CEO of Newmarket Gold, which is arguably one of the most successful stories in the past 5 years. Went from a $10 million company to $1.2 billion sale to Kirkland Lake 14 months later. A number of our board members are co-founders of Calibre and involved in that company. It's created about $600 million of shareholder value and counting. Greg Smith, he was previous CEO of Calibre. He's our VP Exploration, came and joined us when Calibre became a producing company. Many of you will probably know George Salamis and Doug Hurst as well, and the successes that they've had. My background, I've spent 15 years on the capital market side of the business, 12 years in London, covering the big global natural resource funds over there and advising mining companies on capital raises and other deals over the years. And that's where I got to know a lot of the team here and worked closely with a lot of these companies that you see on the list. I mentioned Greg Smith. He's our VP Exploration. Greg's got over 30 years of exploration experience. He's worked on our Enchi project on and off for the past 10 years. Prior to that, he's worked in a number of other greenstone-hosted deposits around the world. He's run 100,000 meter plus programs with 200 people reporting to him. So very experienced geologist, and he's great to have on our team. Mal introduced herself earlier. She joined us about 3 months ago, and we're very blessed to have had her join us, and she's been a phenomenal addition to the team. In terms of Dan Wilson, he's our country manager. We always like to highlight Dan. At the end of the day, no matter where you're operating in the world, you have to have good social license. Dan's worked on our Enchi project on and off for the past 10 years, and he's been with us for the past 20 years, and he's been with us for the past 10 years. Where we really saw the value of Dan shine was when we kicked off our initial drill program. Within a week, he had bridges being upgraded, roads being built, and pads being laid, as well as deals done with the local farmers and chiefs. So he's a great part of our team. Just moving to the next slide here. ESG is something that's very important to us at Newcore. It's also very important to a lot of our institutional shareholders. And as an exploration company in Ghana, we are looking to meet as many of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as possible. Some of the things that we've done in the past, and then we're doing at the moment, donating computers to local schools. We've upgraded and installed a number of wells as part of our drill programs, fixing bridges so local farmers can get product more easily to market is another thing that we do, is along with a number of other initiatives. With COVID, Ghana has fared a lot better than a lot of parts of the world, and specifically where our project is in Western Ghana. COVID hasn't been as bad there, but ultimately we want to make sure that our employees as well as our contractors are safe. So as a result, we've got a number of policies and procedures in place, including daily temperature checks, hand washing stations, as well as PPE and other procedures for all of our employees. Looking now in a little more detail at the capital structure and the support that we've got from the market. I've touched on a little bit of this already, but just under 99 million shares outstanding, true shareholder alignment through our 32% ownership in the business, institutionally very well backed, 35% ownership at the moment across about 25 different institutional investors. And these are a few of the investors down in the bottom left here. These are investors that when I was joining as CEO and Doug was stepping up as chairman and Greg was coming back as full-time VP exploration, they were quite keen to get involved in the company. These are groups that I've worked with for 15 plus years, and needless to say, to have the support of deep-pocketed, long-term focused institutional investors is very helpful for a company of our size so that we can execute on our vision. As well as having the support from institutional investors, it's great to have the support from the street as well. About a month and a half into the relaunch of Newcore, beginning of August, we had 5 tier 1 investment banks out of Toronto covering us from a research perspective. So really great to have that support, and looking forward to continue to work with them going forward to create significant shareholder value. We did relaunch the company at the beginning of August. We kicked off our initial 8,000 meter program mid-August, and we ultimately put out an updated resource middle of September. We put out our first set of drill results at the end of September on Boeing. We've put out 2 additional set of drill results over the last month or so. We announced and closed the financing. That financing closed at the beginning of November, and we announced an additional 50,000 meters of drilling, taking our total program to 58,000 meters, which, as I've mentioned, is the largest ever program on this project. I'm actually just back from Ghana, and Greg Smith and I were over there, and I'm quarantining at the moment, but Ghana is a great country to be operating in. It's globally the 7th largest gold producer, and it's Africa's largest gold producer, producing about 5 million ounces per year. With that, you've got a hugely aligned government. It's important for the economy. It's important for the tax base, as well as important for labor in the country. And with that, we've got a huge amount of skilled labor that we can ultimately draw on at our project, and ultimately that's a real benefit for us. The other thing is, with that 5 million ounces of production comes a huge amount of mining services in country. So for example, our drilling company that we're currently working with is a 4-hour drive from us. They've got a full maintenance warehouse there, and if we ever have any issues with our drilling equipment, within a half a day they can have people on site changing drill bits or compressors or tracks or fixing any issues there could be. On top of that, our assay lab is about a 3-hour drive away. They've been turning our assays around in 2 or 3 weeks. Greg and I went and visited them on our way back to Accra. We spoke about the additional 50,000 meters of drilling that we're doing at the moment, and they reassured us that it won't be a problem to continue getting those assays back so quickly. I know that's been a big issue for a lot of the North American companies at the moment, and the Aussies looking at 10, 12 plus week wait times. And again, I think that speaks to the quality of Ghana as a jurisdiction to be operating in, and we're ultimately very, very fortunate from that perspective. Where we're actually located in Ghana, you can see down here, we're located in the southwest corner. If we zoom in and have a little bit closer look at that, there's two prolific belts that run through Ghana. We sit on one of them, which is the TSX-V Bibiani belt. We've got very good neighbors in country. So to the north of us, about 50 kilometers, you've got Kinross's Chirano mine. That produces about 200,000 ounces per year, 5.5 million ounce endowment there, and growing if you follow some of the exploration that they've been putting out recently. Bibiani to the north of that at 6.5 million ounces. And then you've got one of Newmont's two producing mines in country, the Ahafo mine, sitting at about 15.5 million ounces. So very good neighbors in country. To the south of us, we actually butt up, if you look closely here, to the Cote d'Ivoire border. Directly on the other side of the border from us, you've got Teranga's Afema asset. If you've been following Teranga at all, you'll see that they've been putting out very positive exploration updates on Afema, and it was even mentioned as one of the assets in the press release that Endeavour and Teranga released as part of their merger announcement. So great to see that our neighbors who share some of the similar geology to the south of us are also equally excited about the exploration opportunity. Looking at our assets specifically in a little bit more detail, you can see here it's 216 square kilometers, so a very big land package. From the northern end to the southern end, you're looking at about 40 kilometers in length. So true district scale opportunity for us. And ultimately, we've identified 25 targets or anomalies across the overall property, of which we've only drilled 6 of them to date, and 3 of them host our current resource. So lots for us to go after. Looking at that current resource, it's 1.22 million ounces. One of the things I always like to highlight is if you look at all the historical diamond and RC drilling that's been done to ultimately feed that 1.22 million ounce resource, you'll see that it adds up to about 49 or 50,000 ounces. So needless to say, the 58,000 meter program that we're doing at the moment is very significant, and it's the largest ever exploration program on the Enchi property. Another thing I'll just highlight is this chart here on the right. You can see here, in total, we've done about 88 kilometers of work, or there's been 88 kilometers of work done across the project over a number of years. All of that work ultimately feeds Greg and his team's geological understanding of the project, and we ultimately like to think that de-risks the overall project. I sometimes joke that as and when we grow this to a 4 or 5 million plus ounce resource, it'll be a 15, 20 year overnight success story. But that historical data that we've got, needless to say, really helps us from that perspective. Looking at the 58,000 meters of RC and drilling that we're doing at the moment, you'll see that a bunch of it is focused on our existing resource area, so Boeing, Seum, and Niam. If we look at the map here on the right-hand side, you'll see that Boeing holds about 530,000 ounces, Seum about 535, and Niam about 155,000 ounces. Other areas that we're going to be drilling and we've recently drilled would include Kogina Hill and Quackram. Kogina Hill has had some good historical drill results, 68 meters at 1.14 grams, 0.9 over 29 grams, Quackram 0.9 over 22. Good historical results from both of those areas. We've also been able to drill both those areas as part of our 2020 drilling, and we'll have results out from that in the next couple of weeks. The last area where there's been historical drilling is Arati. It's all the way at the northern end of our property. Historical results, we've done about 10 holes up there and over 1.15 over 10 meters. We will look to get back there in early 2021, have a dedicated rig up there and do a bunch of follow-up drilling on the past drilling that's been done. Outside of that, we do have a number of other targets that we will be drilling in early 2021, where there's been no previous drilling, and ultimately looking to make some additional discoveries at those areas. Looking here at At this slide, a couple of the things that work very well across our project from an exploration perspective: airborne geophysics as well as soil sampling works very well on the project. You can see here, looking at this airborne map on the left-hand side, if you look at those anomalies that kind of stand out on this map, you can see how they line up very well with the soil sampling that we've done. We have done tens of thousands of soil samples across the project, and that's back to my point about all the historical work that's been done, how that feeds our geological understanding of the project and the advantage that gives us. One anomaly I might highlight while we're here is CEU South. It's at the southern end of our project, and as you can see, it's a very large anomaly. It's actually our largest anomaly, sitting at about 3.5 by 2.5 kilometers. We are trenching down there at the moment, so we're putting about 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers of trenches in, with the plan to ultimately drill it for the first time ever in Q1 of next year. So that's one of the new targets that we're very excited about and looking forward to getting the first holes into it. If I leave you with one slide and one slide only, I think this is the one I'd like to burn into your memory. This is the one that ultimately we think really highlights our district scale potential. And if you look here at the map on the right-hand side, you'll ultimately see that coming down to the west of us, you've got the main Bibiani Shear, and where the mineralization sits within our project as well as other projects along the Bibiani Shear. It's the second and third order shears or splays that come off of that main Bibiani Shear. So if you look here closely, you can see we've identified 3 of them. We've got the Niam Shear running on the east side of our project, the Sium Shear running right down the middle of our project, and then the Boeing Shear on the west side of our project. If you add up the total strike length of all that shearing going through our project, you've got 100 kilometers of strike length. We've identified 25 targets, as I've mentioned, of which we've only drilled on 6 to date. So true district scale opportunity and something that we're extremely excited about. One other thing I'll highlight while we're looking at this map on the right-hand side is, often people think of Africa as being in the middle of nowhere and, infrastructure constrained and some of the issues around that. I mean, that couldn't be further from the truth with our project, with our Enchi project. That road, which I just highlighted there in blue, you can drive 100 kilometers along that road. I might suggest you slow down every 5 kilometers for the speed bumps, but needless to say, really good access to our property. There's a power line which runs right alongside that road as well, and it leads to the town of Enchi, which has about 15,000 people. So all the kind of supporting services and that we could want in the town of Enchi for our employees on the ground there. Then throughout the rest of the project, we've either got dirt or gravel roads which take us to our various deposits or targets. So very good infrastructure from that perspective. And as I highlighted, our drill company's a 4-hour drive away and our assay lab's 3 hours away. So very fortunate to have that kind of infrastructure, and one of the reasons we like Ghana so much. Looking at this pyramid on the left-hand side, this is our kind of attempt at showing you how we're systematically de-risking the exploration on our project and ultimately looking to make discoveries and add resource to our overall 1.2 million current resource. So at the top of the pyramid here, as I've talked about, we've got our 3 resource areas: Boeing, Sium, and Niam. They make up the 1.2 million ounces of inferred resource that we currently have. Below that, we have previously drill tested areas like Kojina Hill, Quackrom, and Arati. We will have, as I mentioned, results coming out from Kojina Hill and Quackrom in the next couple of weeks. We will get up to Arati and back to both Kojina and Quackrom early in 2021, with the ultimate goal of moving them from the drill tested category up the pyramid and into that deposit category, and ultimately adding additional resource. Below that, we've got areas like Nkwanta, Sium South, which I've talked about, our largest anomaly on the project, Tokasia. These are areas where we've done a lot of work from a mapping perspective, soil sampling, trenching, and we've moved them to a point where we're ready to drill them. So we will ultimately, drill them, move them into that drill tested category, with the ultimate goal of moving them up the pyramid and into that deposit category and adding ounces. Below that, we've got another, call it 15 odd different targets that we've identified across the property, where we've done varying levels of work on, and we'll ultimately go back to all of these areas, do follow-up work, whether it's mapping, soil sampling, trenching, with the ultimate goal of prioritizing which ones we want to move next up into that advanced target stage, and over time ultimately move them to the top of that pyramid. So if we're sitting here and I'm doing the same presentation in 2 or 3 years from now, I'd like to think that this pyramid's been flipped upside down, and we've added significantly to the number of deposits across the top of the pyramid, and continued to de-risk it all the way down. Looking here now at our 3 resource areas, which I've talked about and we'll highlight in a little bit more detail. So Boyne, Seum, and Nyam. If we look at all 3 of them, you can see here that they are open along strike in both directions. That's highlighted by these yellow arrows that you can see on the different deposits. So we will continue to step out along strike and look to ultimately lengthen the overall size of the pits that we've got, and continue to add resource. Looking at specifically at Boyne and Seum, you can see that there's these gaps in the drilling highlighted by the blue arrows. Those are areas that just haven't had any historical drilling. The anomalies run right through them. The soil sampling runs right through them. And actually at the moment with our one of our 2 rigs, which is drilling, we're actually drilling out this gap area right here. We'll do the same over at Seum, and ultimately look to increase the overall size of the pits and add to the resource. In terms of one other area that we're focusing some of our drilling, I'll just try to highlight it here in red, and you might need to squint a little more than you have on some of the other slides, but we've got about 400,000 ounces of mineralized material, which currently sits outside of the pits. I highlighted some of it there at Boyne, as well as a little bit at Seum. So we're actually doing some follow-up drilling on those areas as well, to put additional holes in to ultimately hopefully widen and deepen the size of the pits and capture some of that material. And we like to think of that as a little bit lower risk exploration, in terms of we know the material's there, and it's just a matter of ultimately capturing it. And then one of the things that we're ultimately most excited about, and the reason I think we've had such strong support from the market and institutions, is the opportunity at depth. This project to date, if you look at it, the average vertical depth of the drilling has been down to only 50 meters. And that's been quite deliberate. It's been drilling which has really been focused on those oxides. And as you can see, when you look at our 1.22 million ounce resource, 75% of it currently sits in the oxides, 20 in the transitional, and about 5 in the sulfides. So the focus of the drilling to date has really been on those oxides, with a maximum vertical depth of only 175 meters. So we've really only scratched the surface from a drilling perspective, and all of these deposits are open at depth, and that's one of the things that for the first time ever we're going to be drilling. If we look here at this slide here, and look at a longitudinal section of our Enchi project, and compare that to the Chirano mine, which again is 50 kilometers to the north of us, where you typically see these greenstone hosted deposits really double, triple, and quadruple in size, is when you start drilling deeper and getting into those sulfides. If you look at Chirano, they've now drilled down to about 1.2, 1.3 kilometers here at Aquaba. They're producing down to 500 meters there. At Paboesi, if you squint again and look closely, you can see underground workings all the way down to 750 meters, with drilling down to about 1 kilometer. The initial discovery hole that they made at depth at Chirano was at about 250 meters. It was 15 meters at about 14 grams. So that's one of the things that we're really excited about, is for the first time ever to put some deeper holes into this project and look to ultimately prove up this same geological model, where when we get into the sulfides and get deeper, we ultimately start to find higher grade. And when I talk about deeper holes, I'm talking about, call it 250 to 350 meters. We'll target those initial holes at Boyne, Seum, and NCAU. Those three areas, given all the drilling that we've done and the fact that our deposits sit there, we've got the best geological understanding of the structures. So we'll put some deeper holes in there and hopefully make some discoveries at depth. We do have a diamond rig showing up any day, so we'll get drilling on that pretty soon. But ultimately, we won't lose focus of what a huge opportunity there is for us to ultimately continue to expand resource at surface as well. So we'll continue to step out along strike at areas like Boeing, Seum, and NCAU. We'll fill in those gap areas at those areas as well. We'll try to capture some of that mineralized material that's sitting outside of the pits that I've talked about. We'll go back to Quackrom, Kogina Hill, and Arati. We'll do follow-up drilling at all of those areas, look to bring them into the resource category. And then we'll look to make new discoveries closer to surface at Seum, Nquanta, as well as Tokasia, which isn't even sitting on this map. So that's kind of our approach. It's a bit of a two-pronged approach. Continue to expand resource at a number of our known areas, as well as areas where we've had previous drilling done, and then make new discoveries near surface at additional areas, and then make some discoveries at depth as well. So high level, that's kind of the Newcore story. Oh, the other thing I would just mention is, as well, is we are going to look to put out a PEA in Q1 of next year, probably towards the end of Q1. If you look at our historical PEA, which was put out in 2015, it had about 712,000 ounces of in-pit resource. We've increased that to 1.22 million ounces of resource. So we think we'll create a further underpinning of value by putting out an updated resource and wrapping a PEA around that. And ultimately, that we think will create value for our shareholders. But the main message here is where we think we're going to create the most value is by drilling and hopefully growing this to a 4 or 5 million ounce plus resource. So maybe just to recap at a high level, I mean, you've got a top tier management and board who are behind Newcore. We're all very well aligned from our ownership perspective through our 32% ownership in the business, and ultimately think as shareholders first. Very strong capital structure with our under 99 million shares outstanding, and extremely well backed from investment banks as well as institutional investors, and it's great to have that support. And then a district scale exploration opportunity, which hopefully, as I ran through this presentation, you were able to see that the opportunity that we've got ahead of us from that perspective. With that, I think Mal is potentially got some questions from people, and then I'd also just highlight, please follow us on social media, as well as visit us on our website, newcoregold.com. And we're always very, very keen to engage with our shareholders and prospective shareholders. So any questions, please send them through.
Thanks, Luke. Very comprehensive, as always. Let's just kick things off with providing a bit more detail on your decision to join as CEO and kind of hop over to this side of the fence of the business, and what ultimately was the determining factor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's two things. I mean, team and asset, and ultimately the Enchi project, when I was doing my due diligence on it, it's a great asset. It's got a lot of work that's been done on it that ultimately we're able to leverage off of for the benefit of incoming shareholders. And we're ultimately able to now put a significant amount of capital into the ground to create value. And then the team, I mean, the team behind Newcore, it's a team that I've worked with for years and I've always held in extremely high regard. And I think team and assets are generally the key things. And I think that that's a big part of the reason why we've had such strong support from the capital markets, and ultimately looking to create value through that.
Team's a big reason why I wanted to join. So,
well, Mal, as I always say, you've been a phenomenal addition to the team, and I often wonder how we would have pulled off the last few months without you. So, yeah, no, we were blessed to have you come join us.
Thanks. It's been a fun, busy 3 months. You mentioned that you just been to Ghana. You and Greg were there for 2 weeks. Can you elaborate a bit more on that, provide some highlights of the trip, and maybe what surprised you the most about your trip over there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of things about Ghana that were great. One is security. I was joking with Greg about 10 days into the trip, or 8 days, whatever it was, that we hadn't once talked about security and hadn't even thought about it. I mean, you can walk around the streets in Ghana the way you can walk around anywhere. So I think first and foremost, security is great. And then our team on the ground in Ghana. I mean, we've got a phenomenal team over there. They're really hardworking, they're motivated, they're keen, and they really want to be part of building something significant. So, I mean, I think that was great to see. And then the mining services in country. I mean, we visited our the drill company that we're working with, and they've got a great operation there. Again, within a 4-hour drive of us. We visited our assay lab. A lot of young guys there who are driving that business forward, and it speaks to the fact that we're getting our results back every 2 or 3 weeks. So skilled labor and infrastructure, I think, would probably be the two biggest things that were reiterated as part of this overall visit, as well as the sheer size and scale of our Enchi project and how much opportunity there is there for us to explore and create significant value for our shareholders.
It's probably nice to get some sun too.
Yeah, that didn't hurt either. You driving back to Accra, you got to drive along the ocean for about 7 hours. So it was nice to kind of look out at it.
So one kind of follow-on question to that would be the political risk. Can you comment on the political risk of operating inside the Ivory Coast?
In terms of political risk, there is an election upcoming, and that was a big on the 8th, and that was a big topic of discussion while we were over there. But historically, the elections have gone very well in Ghana, and that hasn't been a major issue from that perspective historically. And as a result, we're very comfortable with the risk around the elections. So yeah, I mean, that's not something that keeps me up at night by any means, and historically that's ultimately been the case.
And I think to follow on to that, one of the common questions we get is around Ghana and generally Africa being painted with the same brush. Can you provide a bit more detail around that and why Ghana is a great jurisdiction to be in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you highlighted it. I mean, people think of Africa and they think of one country, but it couldn't be any further from the truth. I mean, Ghana's got a 1,000+ year history of gold mining, and with that, I mean, you've got a huge amount of skilled labor and expertise in country and familiarity with the mining space. As well, you've got a government that's very well aligned. I mean, 5 million ounces of production in country. You've got multiple major companies operating there. Newmont producing over 1 million ounces. Kinross, Anglo Gold with multiple mines. Gold Fields with multiple mines. And maybe one of the things that I'd highlight is don't listen to what I'm saying, but look at what's happening with Cardinal at the moment. You've got 3 companies now ultimately bidding for that company: Shandong, Nordgold, as well as a local company, EMP. And I think that potentially speaks to the desire to get into Ghana and what a great place it is to operate. Combine that with all the major companies that are operating there at the moment. So it's a great place to be, and we absolutely will argue with anyone that it's a tier 1 jurisdiction and a place that we're really comfortable with.
That leads nicely actually into a question we have around other mines that are on trend. So has there been a direct correlation between abundant surface oxide gold and more significant discoveries at depth?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, if we look at Toronto to the north of us, which is our closest neighbor in country, because obviously we butt up against Afema on the Côte d'Ivoire, but it's not a producing mine yet. But if we look at Toronto, how they started with 13 open pits, and then ultimately started to produce at depth as well and underground. So if you look at, again, that slide that I suggested, I hope you remember, you can see how we've got a very similar kind of geological setting unfolding in terms of we've got 3 current resource areas which have deposits. We've got a number of other areas where we've made some good discoveries, and we're going to do follow-up drilling, and we'll continue to do that and look to add resource areas. So very similar from that perspective in terms of how the Chirano mine ultimately evolved from a resource and exploration perspective.
And to follow on that, actually, with all the activity that's been happening of late in West Africa generally, do you have any comments or anything you want to add around Endeavour and Teranga, given Teranga's asset is on the border, right across the border from Enchi?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people in the market have been talking about it for years, that we need to see consolidation in West Africa, and I think other parts of the world consolidation makes sense. I mean, one of the things that with Teranga specifically, if you follow it closely and you look mid-September, they put out a specific exploration update on Afema and talked about how excited they are about the exploration that they've been doing there and how it's going to be a bigger part of their focus on a go-forward basis. So needless to say, for us, they share some of the same geology, and it's nice to have our neighbors equally excited from an exploration perspective. And then one step further, when I read through the Endeavour Teranga press release announcing the merger, which $6 billion odd dollar merger, you'll see that within that, one of the bullet points actually talked about Afema. So I think that's, again, speaks to how excited they are, and it kind of highlights as well that we're extremely excited about our Enchi project, and nice to have our neighbors equally excited.
Yep, agreed. It was nice to see that in the news release. We have a question around Kinross's decision to dispose of their 17% interest in June 2020. Can you dive into a bit more detail around that specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a $3 million private placement early mid-May. And we had a number of institutional investors groups who I've worked with for 15 odd years, who were very keen to get involved in Pinecrest at the time, Newcore, and basically back us. So we were able to get them a little bit of that private placement, but given the amount of demand that there was, it was tough to get any sort of meaningful position. So we worked closely with those institutions to then go and bid Kinross for their block of stock. As a lot of you may have seen, if you follow Kinross at all, you'll see that they've been divesting of a lot of their non-core positions over the last number of months, including their entire royalty portfolio, which they sold to Mavericks. So we took advantage of the fact that they were divesting of non-core positions, worked with these institutional investors, and ultimately we were able to clear that overhang out from our stock at 36 cents a share. So that's the background on it, and it was great to have that additional institutional support with long-term focused investors come in and back the company.
Yeah, I think to something that you mentioned quite a bit, Luke, is that capital de-risking that happened once you joined, and I think that was one of those key elements, and then building out that institutional base. So following a bit onto that, can you just high level go over the cap structure again, whether everything is post-financing, and then layer onto that to ownership of management, and if there's any breakdown you can provide on that specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So current cap structure, we're sitting at just under 99 million shares outstanding and no warrants. I think I've highlighted that at the start, that we never had to issue warrants to attract capital. In terms of the recent financing that we did, $15 million, we had an additional 15 odd institutional investors participate in that. So that took our total institutional investors to somewhere around 25. And they now represent, from what we can best calculate, about 35% ownership in Newcore. Management owns about 32%. Management and insiders own about 32% of the business. I wrote a big check when I joined. I followed on with an investment as part of that recent placement that was done, along with a number of other board members and management team. So that's kind of the rough capital structure as it sits today.
And to add to that, just to answer the question that had come in, that 32% is management and the board of directors, and I'd say there's strong alignment between the two. Doug Forrester and Blaine Johnson are founders of the company, so we kind of see all of ourselves as a team all together. Let's go back to a bit more detail around the asset specifically. So, with the assay turnaround time, you mentioned a lot of countries are seeing this, sort of 3-month-ish delays to actually get their results back. What is our turnaround time expected, and how does that play into potential news flow?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I've been speaking to, Aussie companies and North American companies, and, we're hearing about 10, 12 week plus assay turnaround times at the moment. We're very fortunate again, and I think it speaks to what a great country Ghana is to operate in. We're seeing 2-3 week assay turnaround times at the moment. Greg and I stopped in at our assay lab, or the assay lab that we're using, on our way back to Accra last week. We spoke with them in detail about the upcoming additional 50,000 meters that we're currently drilling, and they reassured us that they'd be able to handle that and continue to get those assays turned around in a 2 or 3 week period. So just to follow up on that, so we've currently got 2 RC rigs turning on site. We had a great month of November from a drilling perspective. We've got a 3rd rig showing up, a diamond rig showing up any day now. So we are going to be getting a lot of results out to the lab, and then ultimately out to the market. So I think we'd expect to be getting news releases out every kind of 3-4 weeks in batches of results. And over the next 6 months, it's going to be extremely busy from that perspective.
And, on grade is another area we do tend to get a lot of questions about. So I think it'd be a good one to comment on in terms of, current grade versus potential grade, and how that plays into the exploration plans.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the focus of the drilling that's been done to date, it's really been focused on the oxides, and as most of you probably know, that's a much more economic or cheaper, less expensive way of mining, by having heap leach mining. So that's been the focus, and that's highlighted by the fact that we've only drilled down to about 50 meters on average. So we've got a very robust economic project with our oxides, and if you look at the 2015 PEA, you can find a bunch of the numbers in there, and we will get that updated in Q1 of next year. So robust project in terms of the current resource that we've got. And ultimately, as we drill deeper, as I highlighted there, looking at that or longitudinal section of Chirano and comparing that to us, and how these greenstone hosted deposits typically evolve, is when you start drilling deeper, getting into those sulfides, you start to find higher grade. We've started to see a little bit of that with some of the slightly deeper holes that we've been drilling from an RC perspective. And if you look at our recent results from NIAM, you'll see as we got deeper into the sulfides, we actually hit 6.25 grams over 6 meters. And that's one of the things, and one of the reasons why we're so excited about the diamond drilling that we're going to be doing over the next few months, is to kind of start getting down to 250, 350 meters vertical, and hopefully starting to really prove up that geological concept that at depth we're going to see higher grades. So economic with the oxides, but ultimately as we get deeper, we'll look to improve the grades.
That leads perfectly into another question around deep drilling. So how deep are you planning to drill, and when is that drilling anticipated to start?
So the first diamond rig is showing up in the next few days. So that will start to drill the first deep holes. Those initial deep holes will be focused at Boeing, and they'll be down to kind of 250 to 350 meters is the initial focus of those deeper holes. So again, in the grand scheme of things, that's not deep, but relative to all the drilling that's been done on our project, for us, that is deep.
So we have a question around kind of further strategy, longer term, development to production potential strategy. How many areas are we looking to prove up prior to moving to a production decision?
I mean, what we're ultimately looking to do, and where we think will create the most shareholder value, is ultimately by drilling and growing the overall size of the resource. The reason you've probably heard me say it multiple times on this call, on this presentation, and heard me potentially say it in the past is, 4 or 5 million ounces is where we're looking to kind of grow the resource to, and then at that stage really start to make some decisions around what makes the most sense from a mining perspective. And part of the reason I often talk about 4 or 5 million ounces is, that's where you're all of a sudden producing 200,000 ounces a year over 20 years, or 250,000 ounces over a 25-year mine life. At that stage, you're attractive to mid caps, majors. You've got a much larger audience of potential interested companies, and then also at that stage, we're going to have a much better understanding of what the sulfides are, as well as which deposits are the largest, the best grades. So at that point, we think we'll start to make some decisions around production, and whether we push it forward and build it, or whether someone else decides they want to come and build it for us. But we think that's a sweet spot in terms of overall size of resource, and globally that becomes a significant resource as well. And hopefully you've seen it through this presentation that the district scale potential we have gives us a real chance and opportunity to get to that kind of resource.
And I think it'd be helpful to elaborate on that just a little bit in terms of that strategy. I mean, obviously, management's aligned with shareholders in terms of their ownership, and ultimately belief is that, we're going to do what's best for shareholders as shareholders and being aligned. But does that come down to producing it eventually and going to construction? Would you need to change the team out? How are we positioned for two different scenarios potentially?
So what we'll continue to do as we grow the resource and we update the resource, and that's kind of what we're doing right now with the PEA that we're going to get updated for Q1 of next year, is we will continue to update the economic studies as we go, because we think that creates a real underpinning of value for our shareholders. And as we're updating those economic studies, we'll ultimately look at them and make decisions based on what makes the most sense for our shareholders. And if there's a scenario where us bringing a heap leach project into production to fund exploration, that makes sense, and that's what's going to create the most value for our shareholders, then that's something that we'll ultimately contemplate and look at the time. So, we won't put a pin in on this is definitively what we're doing. We can adjust along the way if something makes more sense. But the real focus for the moment is growing this to a 4 or 5 million ounce type resource. And we think that's what will create the most value.
Yeah, and I think to add to Luke's point too, just given who's behind the company, they've been able to take assets into production. So I think that we're very well positioned, whether it's through exploration and then into production, if that is the right scenario at that time. So, you've been at the company now 7 months. Do you have any key takeaways or kind of a key learning through that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, moving from the kind of sell side of the business and the investment banking side to the corporate side, it's been a great transition. And I think a few of the key things would be, one is team. I mean, been very blessed to have such a great team to work with here in Vancouver, a great board to be able to get advice from as a first time CEO, to have Mal and Greg and Christian as part of the management team, to have such a great team on the ground at our Enchi project in Ghana. I mean, that's been a real key for me, and I think for Newcore, and ultimately for our shareholders. And then ultimately the asset. I mean, it's rare that you find an asset like this that's had so much work done on it, that's got true district scale potential. And now we've got the ability to put significant capital in the ground to ultimately push that forward. So, team and asset, I think, would be the two key things.
So, as we wrap this up now, want to leave with one question for you. So we've talked about why Ghana. We've talked about why Newcore. Let's explain why now.
Why now? I mean, I think it's the right time in the market. I think anyone who's still on this call is obviously very keen on gold, as we are. We think we're going to have a very strong gold market for a number of years to come. And ultimately, we've got a project that we think can create a significant amount of shareholder value. We're very well backed from the street as well as institutional investors to be able to execute on our exploration exploration plans, and ultimately think that we'll be able to grow the overall size of the resource and create a lot of value for shareholders through all that.
It's exciting to be doing the largest drill program ever on this project, so it'll keep us busy on news flow.
Absolutely.
So that's it. I don't see any more questions. So I kind of want to thank everybody for joining us today. If you do have any follow-on questions, there's one more. How much of your decision-making process is investor-driven?
It's a combination of of investor driven, as well as what makes the most sense and what's responsible. So there's a lot of factors that play into it. I think when we're making decisions, we take all stakeholders into account. On the ground, obviously we consider everyone in the local communities from a government perspective. But then overlaying all of that is our shareholders, and as significant shareholders of the business, we're here to create value, but we're here to do that responsibly, taking all stakeholders into account. So yes, it plays a big part, but I think to be successful, you have to have all stakeholders engaged, and as a result, we take everyone into account when we're making decisions.
And it's a great last question, so thank you for asking it. So on that note, we are going to wrap things up now. If you guys have any follow-on questions, please reach out. You can reach out directly to myself at the info@newcoregold.com email address. Visit our website. There's lots of information. And as Luke had mentioned before, we are very active on social media, so please follow us if you want to stay up to speed and see some videos of Luke from site. We'll have some more content rolled out from the 2-week trip. So we've got Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And I hope everyone has a great day. Stay healthy and safe out there. And thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye. Thanks, Mel.